Well, I think the first thing really to say is it was a deeply harrowing case, and that set out by the judge, Sarah Munro, there as she passed sentence was perfectly evident to those listening on GBNews radio and watching, of course, on television. Absolutely horrific. A young man who had troubled life, to say the very least, who had been abused both physically and sexually by his stepdad and a neighbour who had autism spectrum disorder, who still has that condition, and who really just had a very difficult childhood that led, the judge found, to his own offending behaviour, and no small part was a contributing factor to his own offending behaviour, which resulted in him viewing illegal pornography, then progressing to sexual assault of a minor and also rape, which he served time in prison for. He was abused again, we're told, in prison. And then all of the issues surrounding his grandfather and allegations that his grandfather, although unproven, had been involved in child molestation himself. And as I say, just deeply, deeply harrowing, but a fascinating, I think, insight into the sentencing process, because I think this case really illustrates in stark terms the difficulties that judges have in weighing up what sentence to pass on an individual. Now, you heard, of course, about the aggravating factors, the fact that this man was still effectively of sound mind, that his autism spectrum disorder had not diminished his mental capacity, and that he was still capable of making rational decisions to some extent. But it did impact on that. Also, the aggravating factors, the way in which his grandfather was killed in such a horrific manner, the calculating method of that murder itself. But taking that into account, and we were talking about a 24-year sentence that the judge was considering there. Then, of course, she's taking in the mitigation aspects. Now, mitigation, of course, being all of what we just outlined there about the very troubled nature of this young man's upbringing and what he had suffered himself. The fact that he had sought treatment for his mental health issues, the fact that he had pleaded guilty at the earliest possible stage in this process, the fact as well that this young man had expressed remorse for what he had done right from the outset as well. All of those issues of mitigation were taken into consideration before then Sarah Munro, the judge, passed that sentence, a life sentence, but a minimum term of 10 years. So in other words, this young man, who will be then 35 in about 10 years' time, will be able to apply for parole at that stage. No guarantee, of course, that he will get parole at that stage. Lots of aspects will have to be weighed up, especially about his mental health at that point in 10 years' time. But as I say, an absolutely fascinating insight into the court process. And I think the judiciary, in allowing the cameras in here, want to show the public what they face on a daily basis when they are passing sentence in the most complex of criminal cases, and all of the issues that they have to take into account when they are passing that sentence.